The following is a feature presentation of the Replay Sports Channel, the home for great games. This telecast is copyrighted by the WFL for the private use of our audience. Any other use of this telecast or any pictures, descriptions or accounts of the game without the WFL's consent is prohibited.
Outgained their opponent in total yardage, won the first down battle, and completely dominated time of possession between the 20-yard lines. Oh, and featured a quarterback who completed nearly 80% of his passes.
Right.
You would naturally assume they won the championship, right? I mean, it seems obvious.
Oh, absolutely. You'd think they'd be, fitting themselves for rings and planning the parade route before the fourth quarter even ended. I mean, those are the metrics that usually dictate absolute control of a football game.
I would think so, too. But today, for you listening, we are jumping into a deep dive on a game where the Chicago Fire accomplished absolutely all of that and still walked off the field, having been, well, systematically dismantled.
Yeah, dismantled is the right word.
Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and our mission today is to unpack the Denver Gold's 35-24 victory over Chicago, a win that claimed their very first Pantheon Bowl title, Pantheon Bowl XXIV. Played at Cobalt Arena in St. Louis.
It's an incredible story. I'm excited to get into it. Same here. Now, on paper, Denver capped off this magical, unbeaten postseason run. But looking closely at the sources we've gathered, this isn't just, your standard underdog narrative.
No, far from it. What we're really looking at here is a masterclass in the profound difference between statistical volume and ruthless efficiency. The team that dominated the stat sheet, they did not win this game.
Right.
The team that controlled the specific mechanisms of scoring did.
Okay, so to understand that ruthless efficiency, I think we have to start with the obvious wrecking ball in the room, the game's most valuable player, Derrick Henry. Because, it feels like his performance just dictated the entire physical reality of this matchup.
The wrecking ball is definitely the right place to start. Looking at his production, Henry finished with 23 carries for 127 yards.
Wow.
Yeah, he averaged 5.5 yards a rush, and, this is the crazy part, punched in an astonishing 4 rushing touchdowns.
4 touchdowns. Those numbers are just staggering. But what really caught my eye in the game notes was how early that physical tone was set.
Right from the jump. Yeah, Denver takes the opening drive 83 yards, capped by a 10-yard Henry touchdown. Then Chicago answers, but Denver goes right back to Henry for another 10-yard score late in the first quarter. I'm trying to wrap my head around the physical toll this takes on a defensive line.
It's brutal.
Reminds me of metal fatigue in engineering.
Oh, how do you mean?
Well, if you take a steel paperclip and bend it once, it holds its shape perfectly fine. The structural integrity is intact.
Right.
But if you sit there and aggressively bend it back and forth 23 times, the localized stress causes the metal to heat up. The molecular structure weakens, and eventually the metal just snaps.
I like that.
It feels like handing the ball to a guy Henry's size 23 times is applying that exact same localized stress to Chicago's linebackers until their physical structure just gives way.
That's a brilliant way to conceptualize what a heavy personnel running game actually does to a defense over 60 minutes. It isn't just about, accumulating yardage.
Right, it's cumulative damage.
Exactly. When you have a running back averaging 5.5 yards per carry, you are mathematically staying ahead of the chains on every single down. You aren't constantly facing third and long.
Which neutralizes the opponent's pass rush.
It completely neutralizes it, but beyond the math, there is this physiological and schematic component that just breaks a defense down over time.
Because tackling a guy that massive isn't just tiring. It actively forces the defense to change how they align, right? Like, they have to compensate.
Yes, and that is where the chess match really begins. To stop a runner of that caliber, Chicago has to commit more bodies to the line of scrimmage. The linebackers have to cheat forward.
They're creeping up.
Right, and the safeties start creeping down into the box. And when you do that, you leave your secondary isolated in single coverage. Henry's early dominance, those 2 first-quarter touchdowns, it forced Chicago into a highly reactive state.
Denver was basically dictating the physical terms of engagement from the opening whistle. And, when you are playing from behind against a team that can methodically grind the clock while physically battering your defensive front, the margin for error just evaporates.
It's gone.
Which brings up a fascinating paradox, because despite Henry dictating those physical terms, Denver was actually losing the territorial battle for most of the night.
They were losing the yardage battle significantly, actually. Chicago outgained Denver in total yards 403 to 391.
Which is wild.
And they beat them in first downs 24 to 21. Plus, Chicago's supporting cast was incredibly effective.
Yeah, let's look at that for a second. Jameer Gibbs racks up 97 rushing yards for Chicago. David Montgomery scores 2 touchdowns on the ground, a 6-yard run early, and a really clutch score with just 1.05 left before halftime.
Right.
So, I have to play devil's advocate here. If Chicago moves the ball better, gets more first downs, gains 403 yards total offense, and has 2 different running backs finding success, how do they lose by double digits?
Makes a great question.
How does the team that commands the middle of the field actually lose the game?
Well, it comes down to the fundamental difference between moving the football and scoring points. We tend to conflate the two because usually, one leads to the other.
Right.
But they require entirely different tactical skill sets. The ultimate differentiator in this game was the red zone, that area inside the opponent's 20-yard line.
So walk me through why that specific 20-yard patch of grass is so drastically different from the rest of the field. I hear analysts talk about the red zone all the time, but is it just a mental block for the players? Like, what actually changes?
It's a complete environmental and geometric shift. Between the 20-yard lines, the offense has the entire vertical length of the field to operate.
Lots of space.
Tons of space. The defense has to respect the deep pass, which naturally spreads defenders out. There's grass. But the moment you cross into the red zone, the physical field shrinks. The back of the end zone acts as an extra defender.
Oh, because there's literally nowhere else to run. So the defense doesn't have to worry about getting beat deep anymore. They don't have to backpedal.
Which changes everything. Those safeties that were playing 20 yards deep to prevent a bomb, now they are sitting at 8 yards. The linebackers compress.
Right, it gets crowded.
Super crowded. The passing windows for the quarterback go from the size of a bay window to the size of a mail slot. The game gets dramatically faster, significantly more congested, and the margin for a quarterback's error drops to near 0.
Wow.
And this is where a team's physical identity is truly tested.
Okay, so Denver's offensive style, handing the ball to a battering ram, is practically built for a compressed field. You don't need a perfectly timed pass into a tiny window if you can just overpower the defensive line and fall forward for 3 yards.
That's exactly it. Denver was a flawless 5 for 5 on their red zone trips in this game.
5 for 5.
5 trips, 5 touchdowns, maximum efficiency. They didn't rely on spacing. They relied on absolute physical certainty.
While Chicago was doing what? Just accumulating stats in the middle of the field where there's plenty of room?
Yeah, we call them hollow yards. Marching from your own 20-yard line to the opponent's 30 feels great. It gets you first downs, it pumps up your total offense to 403 yards, and it looks fantastic on a broadcast graphic.
But it doesn't put points on the board.
Exactly. If you stall out in that compressed red zone space, those yards mean absolutely nothing on the scoreboard. Denver's sheer ruthlessness in the red zone exposed the hollowness of Chicago's offensive volume.
I can only imagine the psychological toll that takes on a team. If you're Chicago, you're looking at the stat sheet thinking, well, we are dominating this game. Yeah. But you look at the stadium scoreboard and you're fighting for your life. That dissonance has to create an immense amount of internal pressure.
Oh, definitely. And pressure creates structural collapse. We saw that collapse manifest in the second half through Chicago's decision-making.
Let's set the scene for the listener on that. We go into halftime, and the score is 21-14 in favor of Denver. But Golan had gotten a 12-yard touchdown pass from Geno Smith to Mike Evans, and then Montgomery answered for Chicago right before the break.
Right, a tight game.
So it is a one-score game. Very tight. But coming out of the locker room to start the third quarter, Chicago attempts a surprise onside kick, and they completely botch it. They fail to recover. Which
immediately hands Denver the ball on a silver platter.
Right. They get a phenomenally short 49-yard field. Denver methodically turns that into a 9-play drive, capped by Henry's third touchdown, a 4-yard run to make it 28-14.
Yeah.
I have to push back on the coaching logic here. I was reading this thinking, was opening the third quarter with an onside kick an act of absolute desperation. I mean, it felt like coaching suicide. You're handing the ball to the hottest red zone offense in the league at midfield. How can any strategic model justify that when you're only down by a single score?
It definitely looks like suicide in hindsight, certainly. But in real time, it was an acute awareness of a devastating mathematical reality.
Okay, what do you mean?
Chicago's coaching staff spent halftime looking at the exact same thing we are discussing. Their defense could not physically stop Derrick Henry. Every time they punted the ball away in the first half, Denver was engineering these long, grueling drives that chewed up the clock and exhausted the defensive line.
So the logic is, well, we can't stop them from driving 80 yards anyway. We might as well try to steal an extra possession.
It's an extreme application of game theory. The Chicago staff calculated that giving Denver a long field was just a slow death. The onside kick was a calculated gamble to flip the script, create a sudden momentum shift, and keep their own hyper-efficient offense on the field.
But the punishment for failing that gamble is immense.
Huge, because it violates the cardinal rule of playing a highly efficient team. You cannot, under any circumstances, give them a short field.
Right.
When a team is perfectly efficient in the red zone, handing them the ball at midfield is essentially spotting them 7 points. You eliminate the only part of the field where they might actually stall out. You just remove 30 yards of effort from their plate.
And that compounding pressure just snowballs from there. Later in the third quarter, Chicago goes for a critical 4th down attempt and comes up empty. Another massive missed opportunity.
Yeah.
And every time Chicago makes a mistake, Denver punishes them. Cameron Dicker does manage to hit a 41-yard field goal early in the 4th for Chicago, narrowing the score to 28-17, but Denver just shrugs it off. Henry finishes a 7-play, 60-yard drive with his final 5-yard touchdown run, pushing it to 35-17 and effectively ending the game.
That vicious response is the hallmark of a championship team. They don't just quietly capitalize on your mistakes, they weaponize them.
They weaponize them, yeah.
When you fail a 4th down conversion, they don't just take the ball, they drive it down your throat and score, making you regret the decision so deeply that it alters how you play the rest of the game.
That altered state is so visible when you look at the two quarterbacks in this game. Because Geno Smith for Denver and Baker Mayfield for Chicago were playing under vastly different psychological and mathematical conditions down the stretch.
Their stat lines read like two guys playing completely different sports.
Let's look at those numbers. Geno Smith plays this hyper-clean, almost surgical game. He goes 20 of 31 passing for 222 yards, 0 interceptions, and hits that crucial 12-yard touchdown to Mike Evans.
So efficient.
He was relying heavily on Brock Bowers, who had a phenomenal night, 6 catches for 101 yards. Now contrast that with Baker Mayfield. Mayfield goes 19 of 24 for 255 yards. Statistically, completing nearly 80% of your passes is incredible.
It is.
But he has 0 passing touchdowns. He showed tremendous grit, scrambling for 42 rushing yards and punching in a 16-yard touchdown run midway through the 4th. But then comes the fatal blow.
The interception.
The game's only turnover. Mayfield throws an interception on Chicago's final drive right into the teeth of Denver's secondary.
The differing environments those two operated in explain those contrasting stats perfectly.
When I was prepping for this, I had this descriptive image in my head of Smith as a steady pilot navigating perfectly clear skies on autopilot, while Mayfield was like a pilot flying through a hurricane with alarms blaring, forced to abandon the flight plan and do absolutely everything manually.
That's a great analogy.
But tying it back to what you said earlier about the mechanics of the run game, well, it makes perfect sense why Smith had clear skies.
Let's connect those dots, because they explain the entire offensive architecture. Smith had the immense luxury of operating within a dominant structure. When Derrick Henry is rushing for 127 yards and bruising the defensive front, the linebackers become utterly terrified of the run.
Right.
So they have to bite on every play-action fake. They step up toward the line of scrimmage, abandoning their coverage zones.
Which explains Brock Bowers having 101 receiving yards. The middle of the field is wide open because the linebackers are physically overcompensating for the battering ram.
That is the mechanical reality of this offense. The run game manipulated the linebackers out of position, creating a massive void in the middle of the field for Bowers to operate. Smith didn't have to force passes into tight, contested coverage.
He just had to execute the offense.
Exactly. Distribute the ball to the open man, and most importantly, avoid mistakes.
While Mayfield, on the other hand, is staring at a scoreboard where he knows if he punts, he might not see the ball again for 8 minutes.
The turnover differential is the simplest, most devastating stat of the night. Denver committed 0 turnovers. Chicago committed 1. When your opponent is perfect in the red zone, when they are methodically grinding down the clock, you are faced with a massive mathematical disadvantage.
Yeah.
Mayfield had to play a literally perfect game to overcome that math.
And he tried. I mean, he threw for more yards than Smith. He ran for a touchdown. He was completing an incredible percentage of his passes.
He did. But in the closing minutes, when the desperation peaks and you realize you need a touchdown just to stay alive, you press.
You force it.
You try to force a ball into a window that simply isn't there, trying to make a heroic play outside the structure of the offense. And that's when the interception happens.
The structural integrity finally snapped.
Yeah.
Just like the paperclip.
A single snap, and Chicago's incredible run was over.
You know, zooming out from the specific X's and O's of this matchup, I want to look at what this flawless execution means for the history books. Because viewing this strictly as a single championship game kind of undersells the magnitude of what Denver just accomplished. This is a massive historical anomaly.
Oh, without a doubt. The path they took to get this trophy makes the victory exponentially more impressive.
So obviously this is Denver's first ever Pantheon Bowl title, which is huge for the franchise.
It's huge.
But they did it as a wild card team. They put together a completely unbeaten postseason without ever hosting a game. To put that in perspective for you listening, they are only the 9th non-division winning team to win the league title. And they are the very first wild card team to win the Pantheon Bowl since the Washington Federals did it, way back in 2012.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, there's this incredible underdog narrative here. They essentially came into the playoffs through the side door as a wild card, and then just proceeded to systematically kick down every main door on their way to the trophy.
And kicking down those doors requires a very specific mechanical build as a team. What's fascinating to study here is why a wild card run is so incredibly rare in professional football.
Well, because you don't get a bye week, right? You don't get to rest your players while the division winners sit at home and heal up.
Exactly. You get no rest, you get no home field advantage, you are forced to go on the road week after week into hostile environments, surviving an absolute gauntlet.
Living out of suitcases, dealing with the travel fatigue, trying to communicate offensive audibles over 80,000 screaming opposing fans.
All of those external factors usually grind a team down by the third week of the playoffs. But Denver proved that if you peak at the exact right time, and if you possess a physical running game paired with an opportunistic defense, you possess the ultimate postseason equalizer.
Because a battering ram isn't affected by crowd noise.
Yes. And that is the key takeaway for how you build a championship roster. You can silence a hostile crowd when you hand the ball to a guy like Derrick Henry and just march down their throats for 8 minutes.
Right, the crowd gets real quiet.
Very quiet. You don't need the comfort of your home stadium when your defense creates timely turnovers and your offense converts 5 out of 5 trips in the red zone. Travel fatigue just doesn't affect that kind of fundamental physical execution.
It's a brand of football that travels anywhere. You build an identity that is entirely impervious to external conditions. It doesn't matter if you're playing in a dome, in the snow, or in St. Louis for the Pantheon Bowl, because the physics of a battering ram apply the exact same way in every single stadium.
It's a brilliant reminder that in high-stakes environments, ruthless efficiency will always triumph over sheer volume. Chicago had the impressive yardage, they had the first downs, but Denver had the absolute certainty when the field shrank.
Which brings us to the core takeaway from this deep dive. Denver allowed Chicago to have the illusion of control while quietly executing the fatal blows when the stakes were highest. They dominated the only spaces that actually mattered: the red zone and the turnover column.
A perfect summary.
So I want to leave you with a thought to mull over. The next time you look at a sports box score, or, frankly, the next time you look at any complex set of data in your own life or career, ask yourself, are we too obsessed with who controls the middle of the field? Are we getting distracted by the flashy volume numbers while ignoring the underlying mechanics of success? Because this game proves that 400 yards of offense, 24 first downs, and all the highlight reel plays in the world mean absolutely nothing, well, if you don't have a battering ram ready for the final 20 yards. So